In the previous episode, I sailed from Ashmore Reef to Christmas Island. Here, I sail 4 days further west to Cocos Island, an atoll associated with a nearby separate island called Keeling. Finally, Monday the 16th, I'm leaving Christmas Island. Wow, it's been 6 days here. It's really been cool. I've really enjoyed it. There's the town of settlement. See the other towns up on the various plateaus, mostly Chinese dominated. And you see the massive phosphate loading docks there. And there's Flying Fish Cove, where I spent 6 days on the mooring. And there's the rest of the plateau and the island. We went diving over here along this cliff edge here, the limestone cliff. And we're going all the way to this point. Then we can finally turn. As if to say don't leave, there's a juvenile Abbott's booby flying around us, circling us here. Let me just go up, and there it is. See the black on the back of the wings, and then white for the back of the body. Two Abbott's boobies here. They've settled down on the water, having an argument with each other, squawking at each other. What weird birds. Red-shafted tropic birds sitting on the surface, chilling. Yeah, you're a good looker. This is North Point. There's some nice swell coming in now, breaking waves on the rocks. Beautiful turquoise blue water suggesting sand underneath. I'm not sure you'd want to anchor there. Here we go, the whole island. Settlement at Flying Fish Cove, all the way along the flat plateau, the third level of the raised limestone from an atoll on top of the extinct and eroded volcano. Little beach there, cute. And then this is North Point with the waves crashing on the rocks. Well, there went a booby, brown booby. The land goes on over there, and actually we're going to go that way to Cocos-Keeling, but we've got a wind shadow here from the island, so we have to motor for a little while. That's okay, we'll get there eventually. Now we're out of the lee of the island into the trades. We're on a beam reach, doing 6 to 7 knots. Yes, 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 yes. Once again, most of the fruit I was able to get on Christmas Island was temperate, shipped in from the mainland, but a large bunch of the lovely small sweet tropical bananas almost made up for that. I have not talked much about some of the reasons I particularly like Sea Change, a Pacific Seacraft 34, as a sailboat, in addition to her comfortable size for me sailing solo. First, there is the tiller steering, which is simple, robust, and convenient for both wind vane and autopilot steering. Second, it had the single-hander package of lines, both halyards and reefing lines, led aft to the cockpit, and I have added additional lines for the extra reef points. Here is our west-southwest course and distance to Cocos-Keeling, which we sailed in almost a direct line. I caught a nice-sized mahi-mahi along the way and enjoyed the setting of the full moon opposite the coming dawn. And another morning woke to find a booby had spent the night on the auxiliary solar panel, leaving this mess. It's Friday, the 20th of September. I haven't taken much video on this trip because it was really pretty straightforward mostly, except now, this morning, wake up and it's howling, and we have half the jib, Chopper Reef main, we're running dead downwind. Oh! Seas are building, and it's a grey sky, cloudy for a change. It's been clear the whole time until now. Alright, we're coming in. This is Direction Island here. It's the island that we're going to anchor behind. That over there is called Home Island. That's the Malay population of about 500 lives. Way in the distance there's West Island. That's where the airport is, and most of the Europeans live, about 150. Here is a paper map of Cocos with Direction Island at the top, and our chart view of the atoll, plus the satellite view. It was a somewhat convoluted entry to the anchorage behind Direction Island, and I circled the anchored boats a couple of times before picking my spot at the back of them all, with the Google satellite view showing all the surrounding coral. Well, I made it to Cocos. Here's the welcoming committee. Four black turf reef sharks. They're just docile little guys. No sweat. It is beautiful. Woo! What a place. Back to the reef sharks. They're good size, 5-footers. There were 8 boats already anchored here, including right in front of me Ralph's boat Z, the big aluminum E34. I launched my dinghy and visited most of the other boats to get to know them. This boat, far in front, was already familiar to me, Serenada, with Carl and Anne on board, who I first met in Upur and had been tracking ever since. But they had gone up to Indonesia and were being checked in by the Australian Federal Police, who perform the duties of the Australian Border Force here. And the final boat turned out to be Bill on Caramore, who was to become very helpful to me in the coming days. The weather in Cocos was quite unsettled at first, with squalls coming through. But Direction Island was fascinating to walk around, mostly because of its history. Without showing numerous panels, there was a pavilion and a walk around the island, each with lots of posters, explaining how it was a crucial communication center connecting Australia to the rest of the world around the turn of the last century via an undersea cable. But in World War I, a German cruiser called the Emden arrived unexpectedly and without resistance took over the island and destroyed the communications gear. However, the Australians were ready for this, having hidden duplicate equipment and set up a dummy underwater cable, and before they landed had alerted headquarters, who diverted a passing Australian cruiser, the Sydney, to confront the Emden, resulting in the Emden being severely damaged and run up on nearby Cocos-Keeling Island. When the communications centre had become redundant in the 1960s, most of the substantial settlement here was bulldozed into the sea on the north shore of the island, which then became a nature reserve. Here are some of the concrete, metal, and brick remains on the north shore, including massive machinery. As usual, the birds were my favorite, particularly the numerous fairy terns, now called white noddies, that incubate a single egg stuck to a branch, which this pair might have been doing. Much like Middle Percy Island off the Queensland coast, there is a shelter here where passing cruisers had left various signs and memorabilia, including quite a few boats I'd met the year before and even this year, like Tin Lizzie and Link 1. I added my own sign, rather inartfully painted, on a piece of asbestos siding. At the south end of Direction Island, there is a channel that the tide flows through, called the Rip. Now this is looking southeast, and just on the distance you might see a white spot. There's a new sailboat coming. And then this is called the Rip, the channel, and it's just gone past low tide. And so this is when you want to go, or a little bit later, as the tide is coming in. There's Home Island on the far side, and this little button over there with the trees is Prison Island. And we went down the Rip, Ralph and I did it twice. And you get out down at the bottom down there, and you swim to the side to the beach. Very cool. An occasional ferry takes one to Home Island, here with Bill posing, which in addition to a supermarket had colourful murals on many public buildings like these. The museum, unfortunately, was closed. Nearby was a shelter for the locally built wooden sailing boats that are sometimes raced in the lagoon, which are quite beautifully crafted. As is common in anchorages, most of us would gather on the beach for sundowners. Here I met 2 more boats and crew I would meet up with again repeatedly. This is Skyfall, Tom's Gunfleet 43. And here is Bill's boat Caramore, a Westerly Ocean Lord 41. On my second day in Cocos, I suddenly developed what turned out to be floaters in my left eye, associated at night with flashes of light. Bill had Starlink and kindly let me use his internet service to research what was happening, which suggested that a possible progression was to retinal detachment. So, with advice from my ophthalmologist friend Frank in Surfers Paradise, I flew to Perth to get it checked out, luckily being reassured that there were no serious issues, just an artifact of aging. I had 2 days in Perth before the next flight to Cocos, so enjoyed some of the city and surroundings, including this out-of-place rhinoceros sculpture, shopping lanes for South African foods, and yet more beautiful local artworks at the Art Gallery of Western Australia. This is a painting called The American Dream, an Australian artist who lived in New York in the 60s for 2 years. Got pretty depressed about the whole American scene, and nonetheless ended up with a little bit of optimism at the end of it. At the Fremantle Sailing Club, as always, I enjoyed walking the docks to see the huge diversity of boats, from racing boats like these to small, medium, and large cruising boats, including this unusual triple master, but not this monstrosity. I had an Airbnb up the coast, and after a final barramundi dinner, returned my rental car, an EV from the ascendant Chinese company BYD, that was very good. On the return flight, we flew along the edge of the atoll, with a view of the Malay town on Home Island. Back on sea change, most everyone else had left, just 2 boats remaining, and the crew of one kindly picked me up by dinghy from Home Island. I waited out a series of squalls before leaving the next day. In the next episode, I make the long 16-day passage across 2,000 miles of the empty Middle Indian Ocean.